So you're ready to start now, Layla?
Yes, I already started. You can start.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Phil Hames from TBSC. We're a Microsoft ISV partner. We focus on Microsoft Cloud optimization, Microsoft 365, Azure, and Copilot. Today, I'm pleased to say that we've got Peter Vasey, who is an independent Microsoft consultant. He's worked on Microsoft environments for most of his career, and he specializes in AI and work process improvements. I'll let Peter introduce himself, and we can then continue with the presentation.
Thanks, Phil. So yes, I'm Peter Vasey, and I have worked predominantly in the Microsoft arena for about 30 years. I have worked for the likes of Samsung and KPMG. I've worked for small, complicated organizations, and for about the last 10 years, I have been at the forefront of emerging sort of modern work technologies, including AI and automation. Do you just want me to go straight into it, Phil, or? Oh, you put yourself on mute. Give me a nod.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, let me just share my screen. So, fairly standard approach to this. I've got some slide contents that I will talk through, and what I would really like to do is get as much value out of this as possible for you. So we have a Q&A section available in the Teams meeting. If you have questions, pop them in there, and then we can talk through them live as we go towards the end of the actual presentation. So it'd be really good to answer the questions here and now for you, if possible. So today is reducing cost, increasing margin, and accelerating growth. Let me just move on. So one of the things that we hear fairly frequently is the conversation about productivity. Productivity is great if you can give someone the capacity to work at 120% of what they're capable of. It's not necessarily a bad thing. But more and more, we are finding that the CFOs and FDs are getting to the point where they want to see something tangible back within the organization. Productivity, if somebody is 20% more effective, does it mean that they do 20% more overall, or do they work in less time and potentially go and grab a cup of coffee? So there's an argument between productivity and productivity leakage, as it's referred to, versus that of something that will either help you sell more, retain more, or cut costs. So we're going to look at three sort of areas: people, process, and culture, and we're going to look at it in the context of a framework. So from a people perspective, we are talking about headcount. Now, that comes in several different guises. It might be that you have existing vacancies open, in which case, do you actually need to recruit someone, or can that be automated instead of actually taking on a person? Same with new vacancies, where you want to build and expand a team. Are the tools there actually to provide you with that same end, that same output, versus having to take on another head? And also, one that is becoming increasingly common at the moment is the actual reduction of the size of the workforce. There are particular target areas which are being impacted more than others. Part of that is things like contact center, etc., where agents are becoming more and more intelligent and more of that first point of contact. So headcount is important. Whether you redeploy people is a different discussion. Process, one of the things that we see quite frequently is that people talk about the processes and they use AI to do a small component of it. the people who are making the best inroads and gaining best returns are the ones who are actually reimagining that process rather than actually just taking it as a linear, this is what we do, let's automate it. But they are reimagining it, thinking, seeing how it could work, knowing what the tools can do. And when you do that, you also then lead into redefining people's roles. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail later. But an example of it is if you have someone who has 5 human agents and they suddenly introduce 15 to 20 AI agents, then that person is going to have to learn how to performance manage. It's going to have to be part of their role, and you're going to have to treat that AI agent very similarly to the way that you would a human. And then you come on to the culture, and this is where you start to get a real sort of groundswell approach to innovation and cost saving and time saving, etc. And in order to achieve that, we need to make sure that the staff, the employees, have got the right sort of cognitive skills to be able to work with the technology, because it's now a different skill set that's being demanded. We need to create a culture where people can go, well, I'm responsible from getting this from here to here, but the piece in the middle is down to me as to how I want to get it done. So there's a creativity piece. And in order to understand that, they need to understand what the art of the possible is and what the technologies are capable of. So it requires that supportive wraparound. So first of all, let's have a quick look at the benefit versus the spend from AI. Now, this is part from the Boston Consulting Group. And if we look at the components involved, only 10% of the benefit comes from the actual AI model itself. 20% is from the data, and 70%, the vast majority of it, comes from the way humans interact with it, the way the employees use it and treat it. But when you then start to look at the spend that is invested as part of a percentage of turnover, you'll see that the spend on AI is about 2.5% of the turnover. When it comes to user behavior, it's the same 2.5% spend. But whilst you've got a 7-fold increase between the AI model and the user behavior, this 2.5% that we have on the user behavior spend is typically across the board. So it's everything from presentation training to health and safety training and so on. So there is a marked difference between the benefit, where the benefit lies, and what the spend is. So we have a bit of a perfect storm coming. In fact, it's already here. If we look at the way technology capabilities have grown over the last decade or so, or even longer, it's continually advancing. But when there was the public release of ChatGPT and then all the other vendors followed suit, we saw a shift at the rate of change of technology. Now that's fine, except that since the 60s, when it was originally sort of identified, we have had a steady cognitive decline in the way that people think and work and apply their skills. So we have a gap between what the technology is doing and what the humans are inherently behaving like. So we need to address these things. When we look at communication, there is a chap who in the 80s developed an analysis of communication skills, Albert Mehrabian. His research is widely available to find on the internet. If I'm talking to you face to face, one-to-one in person, you are going to get 100% of my communication stack. You're going to get all my body language, my twitches, my breathing, my body posture, etc. When you start to drop down to video, it lessens. When you go down to audio, it lessens. When you go down to text, it reaches 7% of the communication stack. So when we typically communicate now with AI, we are using potentially our worst form of communication. Even if you talk to your AI, you are still essentially giving it a verbal input of text. It's getting better, but it's no way is it going to make up from that sort of 7% right the way up. So we have a communication challenge. We also have employees who work with in their second or third language. We have neurodivergent people. We have different age generations, etc. We have different education levels. And all of these things go to alter the output of AI technology or that kind of thing. When we look at critical thinking, it is the ability to challenge what you do on a daily basis and challenge the information that you get back from AI. When we talk about information literacy, it is sometimes called AI literacy. It is the ability to articulate fully and accurately what you need. So these are all cognitive skills. But one thing to bear in mind is that every piece of AI that you will interact with operates at a post-grad level. So somebody could be school leaver, straight out, not the greatest education. They will be expected essentially to work with somebody or something that is at that post-grad level. So there has to be that correlation between the two. So how do we start to get to the point of these returns, these cost savings or time savings, whichever it is you're going to use to justify it? The first thing is we've got to be realistic as to where we are on the journey. So I use a bus stop analogy. There are three areas. We use this cognitive audit. It's only 9 questions. Those 9 questions will start to determine where you are in which one of those 3 boxes. So you're either at the bus stop, waiting to see what happens, waiting for the bus to come, waiting for someone to bring something to you, etc. Or you're quite happily on the bus, but you're not actually driving it. And then the third tier is you're on the bus, you're driving it, you've got your employees with you, you know where you're going and where you're heading to. So if we give a sort of a rough description of these 3 things, the waiting zone is typically down to not having a clear strategy or vision and not knowing where you're going to target your return of investment from. And that typically comes down to maybe an incomplete understanding of what the technologies are, what the different types of AI are, etc. And this is the point where your business is going to be actively falling behind those who are getting behind it. But, be reassured, whilst there's a lot of fluff and bluster about how well people are doing with AI, we are still in the early stages. The passenger zone, as I said, this is where you're being swept along. This is the one where you essentially are just going with the flow of what's happening. And with this, you then sort of fall into the risks of operational risk, hidden costs, that kind of thing, because you're not in control. Your users are not in control. They've just been given a tool. And then when you're in the top zone, we are looking at organizational change or the behavioral change of the users, and it becomes a daily ingrained, let's crack on and make a difference with this. So when you find out which one it is, there is typically an ability to go and do a discovery and validation, so you understand where you are. And the kind of things that come out from this are, when you're at the bus stop, it's about having a clear vision of what you're going to do. There are security metrics, there are governance regulations, the center of excellence. There are technical components that need to be in place. And those are something I think Phil's going to talk about a bit in a moment. To get from tier 2 up to tier 3, we need to make sure that our employees have the right sort of cognitive skills to be able to challenge what they do, the trust that they can actually say, I want to do this differently, that they have the foresight, instead of actually just doing what they do on a regular basis, of going, I don't know why I do it like this. Let's challenge it. Let's question the way we do things. And then when you get up to the top tier, we start to get into much more of an organizational habitual change, because we want people to be challenging the norm. We want that sort of Japanese Kaizen type approach where if you spend 4 hours doing something in a day, you look at it and go, well, actually, do you know what? I'd like to be able to get that down to half an hour, instead of waiting until next week where you do the same 4 hours, and then the week after where you do the same 4 hours. Question what you do and what consumes your time. And that comes down to behavioral changes in terms of building a culture of innovation. You want people to feel secure that they can turn around and say, this process is daft. Everybody understands and sees processes that don't make sense, but very few people actually get up and challenge it and say, this isn't right. We look at where you can go hunting for ROI. That's really important. I'll come on to an example of that in a minute. But we then start to get into some things that people don't think about. When you start to talk about the organization and embedding AI into it, you do need to look at how you're going to combine the AI and organizational chart. You're going to get this cyber-human combination. You are going to be redefining people's roles because they are going to be looking after pieces of technology. You need to create a constant learning platform because the technology is coming out so fast and so thick, and the advancement is so pronounced that a one-off training course when a new product come out is no longer particularly practical or effective way of doing it. And we can look at things like, how your performance management, that kind of thing. But all of these things stack. And the reason I say this is because if you're at 1 and you create yourself that vision, that's great. If you're at 2 and you go and you correct and start working with your employees, because not everybody's going to get this, not everybody's will want to go and get this, you have to shift and rethink how and who you want. I mean, you can look at things like Accenture have laid off lots and lots and lots of people because they don't think that they're going to get with the program. I'm not saying that that's the right approach, but you do need to look at who are the people who are going to get it, who are the people aren't. If they're 6 months off from retirement, they probably won't want to know, in which case you need to look at someone else in the team to develop them. And then when you get up to that third stage and you start building this persistently challenging model, that is where you then get to the headcount reduction, if that's what it is that you want to do. If you're looking at cost savings, if it's not got a cost saving of over 30%, it's probably not the right thing to be investing your time and money into. And you then have the slightly less black and white ones where it's decreasing the time to market, it's allowing you to grow, retain more customers, create a more enthused employee group. But you are not going to get to those points if you haven't got 1 and 2 in place. So we want people who will come forward, say, yes, I found a problem in the business, I want to fix it like this. And that's sort of where Phil or potentially some of the other teams internally can come in and say, great, we found something, let's do it. So to give you a use case from an FSI client recently, they were stuck in the passenger zone. They had various different technologies. We looked at what they were using, what they were trying to do, and we run workshops with them to try and build confidence, because there's always a little bit of speculation as to an external consultancy coming in and they're going to rip us apart and do all of these changes that we're not going to want. But actually, when you sit down with them and start to explain what the different types of technologies are, the kind of things they can do, you allow them to play with it and experiment, give them guidance on how they can actually get the best out of it, you start to bring down barriers. And when you bring down the barriers, they then shift from being passive receivers of information into typically about 45 minutes to an hour of a therapy session. And this is where they offload all of their frustrations about the business. So it's good to make sure you have the right dynamics in the room, because you don't necessarily want the top tier leadership teams in there, because it will feel slightly more as if they're being judged on what they're saying. But when you start to allow all that frustration that comes out, you find that people say, yeah, do you know what? I spent like 3 days a month doing this. It drives me nuts. You've suddenly got a use case for that individual. And so in this use case that we had, out of a team of 140, over 7,000 days a year was spent on manual reconciliation of Excel spreadsheets. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. That's a huge amount of time. You've got 3,800 days searching for information. You've got manual documentation and contract reviews. So we pick 4 or 5 of these things and just say, right, what could we do with it? What could it look like? And how could we make that whole sort of process, etc., better? And so that came to 14,000 odd days, 57 FTEs worth of time spent on 4 processes. And once you start to peel this back, you can say, well, we can get rid of this, we can do that, we can chop this, we can change that, we can build an app or process flow that will deal with X, Y, Z. And when we do, basically, it allowed them to free up 31 heads to put them into either redundancy or into a more tangible sort of return or a more value add, is the phrase I'm looking for, role within the company. So the savings are there to be made. For them, that turned into real world saving of 1.3, and that's out of a team of 140 users. So these things that go unseen and unsaid for years can be fixed. You're not necessarily talking about bringing in some Rolls-Royce type solution that's going to completely reorganize your business and take 3 or 4 years to deliver. This is stuff you can identify and you can fix very rapidly. And I think that's where we are seeing most traction at the moment, is people fixing the stuff that's been around for ages that actually causes the problem. And it falls into the category of sweat the small stuff, because actually the smaller things rather than the big business changes are what is causing an awful lot of the pain. So I have rattled at you for just over 20 minutes. Let me just have a look at the Q&A. The Q&A looks utterly empty, which either means that nobody wants to put a question in there, or it means that I covered absolutely everything that everyone wants to know, which I doubt. But if you have a question, pop it in there. And if not, I shall pass back to Phil, unless you've got any questions, Phil.
No, I think I'm fine with that, Peter. So I've got a few slides to share of my own, so I will just share my screen.
Oh, hang on. So we do have a question. Hang on.
Yeah.
Where's that?
So I think,
chat.
yeah.
Let's just jump on that one quickly.
Yep.
Example use cases of AI. So yes, let's take one that is slightly more creative, just to illustrate the point. So a university environment. Now they obviously have the curriculum that comes from the government and the exam boards that they need to present. Every time there is a change made to the curriculum, they have to change the training content, they have to change the presentation material, they have to update all of the notes, etc., as to what they are going to teach. They then have to take that information and make some of it publicly available as a bit of a sort of a media campaign, so that any students wanting to go to that university can get an idea of what it is that they're doing. So with that, what we had was a feed that basically took any changes, compared current course content to the revised course content, identified all the changes, and then that was fed into the course director's content. So it allowed for that to be created automatically, which meant the content was generated automatically. So the course director then became the validator of the content. And once the content was all done, which was created by AI, it then took a suitable component from that new content, turned it into a marketing material, and published that as part of their external validation. So you've got that kind of thing. You have another one where a sort of a help bot was provided, and it would do things like saying, well, if you need to get to this part of the company and you're coming from here, this is the route you're going to take. It would give you sort of routes as to where you wanted to go, what times you needed to be there, how long it would take you to get through various different sessions. It would provide you with all sorts of content, but we gave that a fixed repository of information and allowed that out into sort of testing. So you need to find the problem areas in which to apply AI, not really look for what AI can fix. There's an understanding that, you know, you have to have in place to be able to try and identify those places. But realistically, what we need to do is take the sort of the gardening metaphor. You don't necessarily go out and buy a chainsaw and then go into your garden and think, well, what can I cut up? You go into your garden and think, well, what do I need to do? Okay, I need to mow the lawn. I need a lawnmower. So it's that kind of analogy. But there are lots of use cases. Gosh, lots of questions coming in. Do you want me to answer these now, Phil? Or
Yeah, just go ahead while they're
yeah,
fresh.
yeah. Cool. How should Copilot, core toolkits, and data sources work together so people aren't forced into Excel as a control mechanism? I'm sure I understand the control mechanism bit. Data is really important. So let's start with that. Copilot's great, but Copilot works within, you know, the boundaries of the M365 tenant. What I would say on that front is, if you have poor data, you will get poor output. Now, I think that's, you know, fairly well understood. But one of the challenges is that Microsoft has spent the last 15, 20 years telling organizations to just put information into SharePoint. And you might have 20 years worth of data on a particular topic in SharePoint. So, you know, rather than looking at it from an Excel's perspective, I would say look at it as a root data question. You might want to reply to your own questionnaire to see if I'm going along the right lines here, or whether I'm talking absolute nonsense. But if I'm on the wrong track, then fine, get in contact with us and we can have a sort of a bit more of a detailed conversation. But data sources are one of two things. One, it's either using your existing data source with all the permissions that are on it, whether they're right or wrong, or you define it a little set of information that it would be to answer a specific topic. In FS, can you give an example of where control functions successfully adopted AI risk, fraud, and compliance? Yeah, so a lot of this comes down to, I think, analysis of what you want to do. If you're looking at it from a compliance perspective, then there are lots of things that can be done in order to validate data. When you really start to get into proper fraud in financial services, you're probably looking at specialized tooling. It is possible to build your own solutions with it, but I would say that that is a specialized task. But yeah, Alex, we can have a conversation about that in more detail, because generative AI is great for creating things and creating documents, but I wouldn't necessarily say its capacity goes much beyond, sort of legal contract analysis, definition documents, that kind of thing. If you're looking for patterns, then you're into machine learning or prediction or that kind of stuff, which is a different field. Where do you typically see toolsets being underused or misused? Okay, this is a great question. So lots of organizations push out things like Copilot, and different tools from different vendors behave in different ways. They'll give you different answers. So Gemini and Claude are quite creative. You've got Perplexity, which is sort of a great all-rounder. And Copilot, I think, is much more of a sort of a slightly subdued sort of corporate version. In my opinion, I think it's getting better and better, but it's not quite where some of the other vendors are. What we find is that the tools get pushed out, and actually you end up with people trying to use it, not getting the responses they want from it because they don't have that sort of information literacy, communication, articulation piece. And so it drops back to being a tool that can help you take minutes and meetings. And whilst that's actually a perfectly practical use case, it's not bringing you back real benefit. So I think the big thing where people fall back on manual process is they'll try it a few times, get frustrated, and then they'll just crack on with what they know because it works and they can get it done in a certain amount of time. So you have to give people time to learn to use it properly. So I would say out of most of the deployments we've seen, probably, well, I think it was a piece of research that said something, Section AI, I think it was, said that only 3% of users who have an AI tool provided to them are actually getting a proper beneficial use out of it. So people do get frustrated and they go straight back to what they've done and allow it to take their meeting minutes. How do you prevent AI-supported outputs from bypassing established security governance and trade compliance rules? So I work very closely with a tool called Fender, which it looks at what content and what tools, whether they're paid, not paid, what the keywords are, whether people are trying to copy and paste company information into this external tool, and we use that to either block, but also actually look at the outputs, look at what people are trying to do with it, and say, okay, we've got people trying to use this here. Let's actually bring it in, talk to them, look at whether or not we actually create a solution, a tool, a process, or whatever it is that will allow them to do what they need to do, rather than bringing in shadow IT or trying to skip through and saying, well, I don't get the answer I want out of Copilot, I'm going to go and use Gemini, whatever it may be. So there are tools out there. I think Phil's got some stuff that you can probably talk on, but when you're talking specifically about browsers, then that is a particularly good solution. Copilot support auditability and explainability in regulatory and defense adjacent environments. So yeah, this is a get a cup of tea and a packet of biscuits type question, I think. So it might be one that's better offline, but there is an element of, if you need to have cast iron information on what it's doing, you need to be able to see the decisions it's making and why it's making those decisions. AI within defense is obviously something that needs to be highly regulated. So being able to just chuck something into an engine and get an answer out is not. typically sufficient. So Copilot allows you to look at what searches are being done, what your users are using it for, how much they're using it. But it depends where you want to draw that line on auditability and explainability and how transparent that needs to be. So that might be, again, a specific kind of created solution. Can you share a real example where AI replaced Excel for risk or compliance control? No, is the short answer on that one, Mohammed. Sorry. For me personally, I find AI and Excel a little bit of a challenge. It comes up with all these great things and builds things for you, and I've got no way of validating actually that that's correct or not correct, apart from looking at the output. So I would probably defer to another colleague rather than spin you out an answer that is potentially nonsensical.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter.
Oh,
okay,
blimey.
So yeah, quite a few questions there. That's good. So I'm just going to share my screen, and we can then just look at a few learnings from real life situations. And I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, so we've done probably now somewhere between 30 to 40 projects with organizations, and they are largely looking at the preparation for Copilot and the implementation. So we're really looking at the steps that have been implemented around Copilot, and I suppose the same things apply to other technologies in the AI area. The first thing I'm just going to look at is some research that was done last year by Gartner. And this was quite surprising because although the vast majority of the organizations they looked at had been implementing AI activities with Copilot, only 12% said they could see a real commercial advantage or a real ROI case. And only 6% of them had said, yes, we've cascaded it out across the whole organization. So these were the issues that customers were talking about. So you can see here there are two bars. So there's a darker blue bar and a light blue bar, and you can see the rankings. So number one was security and governance concerns. The second was unclear ROI value. And you can see that both of those were highly rated in the top 4 of reasons they gave for not deploying it, and also highly rated in the first choice. To a certain extent, you would think if the ROI was clear and there was a good business case, then the security and governance concerns would then get solved. So there's a sort of interrelation between these two. The other one that comes out quite strongly is the workforce skills and knowledge. The thing that you would have to say is in all of these organizations, even if they hadn't put in a structure to scale out AI or Copilot or whatever they were using, and not having a strategy is still a strategy, because in most cases, organizations, they're going to have people using AI, whether it's a coherent strategy or not. So the thing that should be thought about is, okay, are we not going to have any strategy and just let people do what they want, or are we going to put something in place, and how are we going to take steps to make sure that we get what we want and we achieve an ROI and commercial advantage from it? So this is really, again, Copilot, but looking at AI in general. The first phase that we see is the familiarization. So this is the users getting to know Copilot, creating presentations, taking meeting notes. They're the things that are useful to individual productivity. The next thing is adoption. So checking users are using it for their tasks and they're active in Word, Excel, PowerPoint. They're sharing data amongst their team. And so we're starting to see that adoption level where, as Peter spoke about, they're on the bus and they're doing things with it. There's a fourth a third area in this group, which is data and compliance. This is addressing that number one concern. So the security and data access, access to SharePoint security settings, all of those things are part and parcel of this ROI case. However, the real benefit comes from process transfer. So this is replacing or existing or adding new processes. So it could be document translation, voice call actioning, things like that. To give you an example, what we're talking about is really removing bottlenecks. So in any organization, you've got bottlenecks, and these are things that are restrictive and they are a risk to your business. If you can remove bottlenecks, you will increase your productivity and you'll increase your commercial advantage. To give you a very simple example, I did a long journey over the weekend, 200 miles there, 200 miles back. And on the way there, I saw a petrol station, and it was selling petrol at 20 pence lower than all of the other garages I could see. It was very, very low cost. When I drove back, I could see there was a few cars in there filling up, and I called in to fill up because I'd used most of my petrol. And I realized then that the pumps were different to any that I'd seen before. Now, they were sort of automated, and they were able to start the process, deliver the fuel, collect the payments. And the great thing about it, I looked around, there was a small office, but there was nobody in it. Everything was locked up. But there was a constant stream of cars coming in, filling up cans as well as filling up their tanks, because the petrol was so cheap. So if you think about it, they'd used automation to remove this bottleneck, and they were able to sell petrol 24 hours a day because there's no staffing involved in it. And they were able to sell at a lower cost than all of the other petrol stations because they didn't have the fixed costs. They'd got no staff to provide. And consequently, they were selling cheaper than everyone else. They were having a high throughput, and it was costing them very little to deliver on an ongoing basis. So that's an example of a bottleneck. Another example is when I was working for one organization, we were releasing technology products on a regular basis, but translating the manuals into 7 different languages. Each language took 2 weeks to translate with a technical translator, and it meant that we delayed our product launches. It also added a large cost of hundreds of thousands of pounds a year. Now with AI, we would be able to automatically translate that. So in our own business at TBSC, we're able to create documents and automatically translate them within minutes rather than weeks. And so consequently, our productivity for introducing new technology and marketing of it has gone up dramatically. So taking those bottlenecks, always think about where can you use AI, and it's where the bottlenecks are. And the research that we found really shows here, you can see on this graph, the orange area is the benefit from familiarization. So I'm able to do a better PowerPoint presentation or a better Word document. The green is the adoption, so working together in teams and sharing information. Funnily enough, data is very important, securing your data, but it doesn't actually deliver the ROI. Where the real ROI comes from is this purple area of process re-engineering. So it goes right back to the idea of automation. And you can think of Henry Ford with the automation of the production line of cars. The same is happening now with the automation and removing the bottlenecks for all sorts of administration work, selling work. There are capabilities now where you'll be able to create from AI interactive AI people that replicate what a salesperson would be doing. So online, you'll be able to have talking with AI people. So the things that we're now starting to see and look at with customers are really creating true automation of commercial processes. Whether you're looking at something that TBSC does or whether you're looking at it on Copilot or on other AI, there's these stages to go through. So number one is in effect a readiness assessment. So it's a check on the security, cost. Are you wasting any cost currently? What users are going to be best for it? Are they already using their existing technologies that mean they can use it? Are there issues? Where we do some of these things, like we did one a few weeks ago and found some malware resident in a tenancy called Read ChatGPT. So it was a malware that was configured to read what you're doing with your AI. So doing that is important, and doing that with any implementation, to do that in conjunction and clean up the basics to prepare a good foundation. The next is really looking at your usage. So for us, we use our Copilot Optimizer, which is saying who's using it, what are they using it for, who have got the best practices, able to control your costs. So if people are not using it, are you going to train them, or are you going to recycle their subscriptions? Copilot productivity, looking at your SharePoint, what's it being used for in these SharePoint groups that are connected into your Copilot, which users have got access to it, and what is the output that's coming out of the Copilot. You need to know how much it's being used and how much your processes are being used for calculating your ROI. The other aspect is the agentic app creation. So I think, as Peter has already said, analysing your processes, looking at where those bottlenecks are, where you're going to get the biggest return for your investment, revising the process, creating the work process with the agents, and then starting to test it and implementing it and keep improving it. And there's another important area, end user training. You're not going to get very much out of it by just allocating the subscriptions, but now it's possible to identify which users need the training and then to provide either online or in-person training, but we tend to use primarily online training. So we have over 20 different lessons on Copilot that can be tapped into and gone through and then checked that they've understood the information. So these are all the things: checking you're ready, checking what you've implemented is being used, making sure that it's productive, creating those apps that are going to remove those bottlenecks, and then making sure that your users are fully conversant in how to use them. So this is myself, TBSC, Phil Hames. If you want to get in touch with myself or Peter, just let us know. I'm just going to stop sharing now and see if you've got any questions.
Yeah, I've just dropped a QR code and my email address in the chat if people want to.
Oh, okay, fine, yeah. Any other questions for Peter and myself?
That feels like a no.
Yeah, okay. All right, if there's no other questions, thanks very much for your interest in attending, and anything that does come up, just let us know and we'll be more than happy to help. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. All right. Enjoy the afternoon.
Bye.